Good morning. This is Dr. Larry Straub, and today I'm going to look over and review Chapter 1 in the Understanding Management book for Principles of Management. And I just wanted to kind of cover some high points with you this week. I know some of you are already in quarantine, and so this will be a way we can kind of keep you up with your class a little bit. So looking over the objectives for this chapter, first is to talk about the nature of management, and that is to motivate, coordinate others to cope with diverse, far-reaching challenges. Second is managers used to exercise tight control over employees, and now that's not necessarily the case. And third, today's managers are doing more with less, having to fully engage employees, view change as natural, and inspiring people to create, collaborate, and productive workspaces. So that is kind of the nature of management. And actually, as I'm thinking about this, I figured out I can go ahead and just share my screen with you all. So I'll do that. There we go. Okay, that'll actually work better. Sorry, I'm learning a little bit as I go here. So, okay, so that's the nature of management. Definition: management is the attainment of organizational goals in an effective and efficient manner through planning, organizing, leading, and controlling organizational resources. There's a few slides here I want to look at. The state-of-the-art management competencies for today's world versus what we used to deal with. Used to be in more production-centered, control-centered organizations. It was more about overseeing work. So you were the controller. Now, in a 21st century environment where technology and change and convulsions are the rule of the day, we have to work with people in different ways, and we're more the enabler. Now we were supervising individuals. Now, more often than not, we're leading teams, and in some cases, we're even almost first among equals. In some cases, the person that's designated as the manager may, in some ways, be just a first among equals type of a situation where they're there to lead the team. That's their role in that team, but they really don't have a tremendous amount of power. We've gone from conflict and competition to more collaboration, including use of social media, from autocratic structural designs to more empowering, sometimes even bossless workforces. Although I still think the verdict's out on that a little bit. I think we're still tinkering around the edges. I don't know that anybody's got completely comfortable with that. From maintaining stability to more mobilizing for change. Used to be we try to keep environments as stable as we could possibly do. Now we pretty much just given up the ghost, and we understand that we have to design our structures and mobilize our people for almost constant and sometimes even convulsive change. 5 things that managers do: set objectives, organize, motivate and communicate, measure, set targets, and develop people. Probably the most important things in today's objective day and age is developing people, measuring and motivating and communicating. Setting objectives and organizing are obviously important, but developing people is really where it's at, is having a very deep bench and then being able to motivate and communicate with folks. And it's not about bossing people around anymore. It's not about intimidating and coercing. Most times you have to really use the softer skills, and that's a good thing. It makes us use a little more imagination and work on many more levels than we used to. Three categories of skills in terms of management skills: conceptual, human, and technical. The degree of skills may vary, but all managers must possess these skills. And if you think of this in terms of a three pieces of pie in a big pie, all of those pieces of that pie are going to be different in every one of us. My daughter, who is a chemist and a scientist, if she were to manage her lab, which someday she may very well do, she's going to bring a much different mix. It's going to be much more slanted towards technical skills. That might be half of her pie, and then conceptual and human skills might be 25 and 25. With me, it would be probably conceptual and human would be, 75% of my pie or my landscape, and only 25% would be technical, because I work much more on the strategic and the conceptual side of things. So each one of us, that breakdown and what the balance is between those three skill sets are going to be different for all of us. Google's rules, 8 good behaviors for managers. First, coaching. Second, empowering your team, but being able to balance so that you don't micromanage. Third, express interest in team members' success and personal well-being. 4, don't be a sissy, be productive and results-oriented. 5, be a good communicator and listen. 6, help employees with career development. 7, have a clear vision and strategy. 8, have key technical skills so you can help advise the team. I think probably one of the biggest ones on there is the communication skills, being able to communicate with folks. Expressing interest in people's personal well-being is obviously crucial, but I think another really important one is to develop people, especially career development. People want to know that they're on some kind of a track, that they have room for growth. And more often than not, when people leave an organization or leave a company, it's because of the fact that they don't feel like there's any clear pathway for them and there's no room for growth. Some of the common management failures: not listening to customers, misinterpreting signals from the marketplace, not building teams, inability to execute strategies, failure to comprehend and adapt to change, poor communication and interpersonal skills. One of the big ones right now is, listening to your customers. Customers are more fickle and more demanding now than we've ever been, and we will be even more fickle and demanding 5 and 10 years from now. That's just the nature of the beast. So being able to listen to your customers, and I mean truly listen, and seeking to understand their needs is absolutely crucial. And many times when you see companies fail and you see strategies fail is when companies misinterpret signals from the marketplace. And there are a lot of signals from the marketplace currently. For instance, if you're a restaurant right now and you're trying to open and do as well as you can in this type of environment, you better be getting the signals that you have to provide a safe environment and a safe and secure environment. My wife and I still go out and eat. We still support the restaurants. We know we have a lot of students that are waiters and waitresses, and we try to get out and support restaurants as much as we can. But I'll guarantee you that if we walk into a place and we don't feel like they're taking safety seriously, we walk back out, or we sure don't go back to that place. We want to do our part to keep these businesses doing well, but they have to do their part as well. So everybody's got to pay attention to the signals in the marketplace. Management levels and organizational hierarchies, and this is interesting because as much as everybody talks about the fact that things have changed, that organizations have changed, and to an extent they have. I think organizations by and large have gotten a little flatter. You see matrix organizations, which not only are managing top down, they're also managing sideways. And we had an organization like that in our business. But by and large, most organizations still look the same as they did 50 to 100 years ago. You have the same levels of management from top, middle, and first and frontline managers. And you have the same chain of command in a lot of ways. Now, the good companies do a good job of making it more seamless. They do a good job of flattening it out. They do a good job of giving safety valves all the way up and down the system so people can get information to the folks that need it and bypass maybe even some of their levels of command if needed. But by and large, organizations still look pretty similar. Talking about becoming a new manager, one of the things, and whether this is from a manager or a leadership perspective, one of the first things that you have to evaluate is, do you want to pursue management or do you want to pursue leadership? Not everybody is wired for this. And to just do it just because you think it's the next step to do in your career, or just to do it because you think that's what's expected of you, sometimes that can be a recipe for a disaster. There are people that are horrible managers and horrible leaders as we speak. And the reason they're horrible leaders and horrible managers is because they hate their jobs and they're not good at their jobs. They may have just got promoted because somebody left and they seem like the natural person to move into that position and they just didn't fight it. Or they may have thought, well, everybody expects me to be a manager, my family, my community, my network, everybody expects me to grow to next step is to be a manager. So they thought they needed to do that, but they're not well suited. They don't have the skill sets. They're control freaks. They can't build teams. They can't communicate. They don't read signals very well. And so the first order of business in becoming a new manager is to figure out, is this the pathway for me? Does it make sense? And if it does, the good news is there's never been more things out there, from the internet to anything available, that can help you. Great training program, day training program, internet training programs that will help you. A lot of these big organizations, they have their own in-house training programs for upcoming managers, even before they get to the management level. So look for organizations that have those types of training programs if you have an interest in pursuing that. Management activities, some of the key ones. One of the things you have to be able to do is you have to be able to deal with ambiguity. And you have to be able to deal with not everything is known. Not everything is set. There's a lot of moving parts, and you're going to have to be able to multitask. You're going to have to be able to stick and move quickly. If you're the type of person that you always have to know where everything is, and if something changes, you freak out, you're probably not going to do well as a manager or a leader. And life on speed dial, things are moving fast, especially in our environments today. Works at an unrelenting pace. We're always constantly interrupted by disturbances, and we're always seem to be kind of playing in catch-up mode at times. Some of the key roles of managers: planning, organizing, leading, controlling. Now, the nice thing, as you move up the ranks, especially as a manager, you don't have to be able to do everything well. If you're a manager, one of the things you may have is you may have the opportunity to have an administrative person that works for you, or a secretary type person. And they may be great at organizing. They may be great at controlling and helping on the functional sides of things. And your forte is in strategy and conceptual stuff. And so there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you have the resources to help back you up in the areas where you're weak. One of the things that many of us, an area that many of us will get our first opportunities to manage is in small businesses, maybe even nonprofits. And these can be very different animals than larger organizations. Small businesses, you may have to wear a lot of hats as a manager, and you may have to deal with a lot of uncertainty, and things may move very, very quickly. And so you've got to have the skills, you got the ability, have to have the ability to adapt. You just have to really be able to stick and move and actually be charged by and love that type of environment. Nonprofits, on the other hand, they can feel very much like small businesses. Sometimes they're really working on keeping their cost structures low. Their revenues may be variable. And so it can be very much like being in a small business environment. Talking about the evolution of management thinking, and management has changed dramatically in the last 20 years. While the hierarchies and the structures of management really haven't changed that much, the skills that it takes to be a good manager definitely have. The tools that you have to have in the toolbox, and the education, the techniques that you got to have today are much, much different than what led to success even 10 years ago. And I think they'll be different 10 years from now. So it's not only coming in with a certain skill set, but it's being able to apply and adapt those skills as time goes and adapt them to the new settings. Here's something just kind of showing the management perspectives over time. In the classical perspective, in the late 1800s, the humanistic perspective, or the humanity of production, or probably more apt to say the inhumanity of production, systems thinking, contingency view. We got into the 80s, and you had total quality management that came on the scene, and that's still very relevant today with Six Sigma, lean manufacturing, things like that. And in the 1990s and on, technology and big data has really taken the scene. Now you have, in the current environment, social media, social business, and people-driven workplaces, where the power has changed from, in some cases, the boss and the organization to more the people. And so there's got to be a much better balance, and you just can't muscle things around and muscle things through the way they might have done a couple of decades or even a few decades ago. The tension between historical forces and management thinking. On one side of it, you got focus on things and production. On the other side, you have the focus on humanity of production. So you've got the nuts and bolts over here, and you got the human over here. And I will tell you, this is an area I really struggled with. I would call my leadership style servant leadership, and I'm a very hands-on, I'm a very people-centered type of manager. And I will say, if I had a fault, I probably erred a little bit too far on the humanity of production. The people factors, trying to take care of people the best we could, and understanding that they had families, they had things that they needed and wanted to do in their lives. Sometimes I struggled with being maybe as tough as I needed to be in the organizational setting and the business setting. I think I balanced it fairly well, I honestly do, but it was a constant struggle with me, both personally and professionally. So if you find yourself in management or in leadership, and you find yourself struggling with that, don't sweat it. I mean, that's part of it. We all have to figure out where we need to be on that spectrum. If we're too caring and we're too soft over here, it may threaten the long-term sustainability of the business. And so we may start out over here, which I did early in my career, and I had to move this way a little bit. I had to move the needle this way some. And I had to get a little tougher in the right situations. And I had to press for a little more accountability with people in situations and in organizational structures. So I think I was able to find a balance that I could live with, that I could, there's the old saying, I got to shave my face in the morning. Well, I felt like I had a balance the last, 10, 15, 20 years of my business career that I felt comfortable with. But it still was a little bit of a tug of war and a little bit of a struggle. Some of the perspectives on management, scientific management, bureaucratic organization, administrative principles, scientific management, Frederick Taylor, back in about the 1920s, if I remember right, they had a move to make management more of a science, and that has continued on. That's why you have degrees like MBAs. That's why Newman University has a part of its university structure, the Newman University Business School. And you see that in most universities where there's either a business college or a business school, because management and business is a science now, very much so. Bureaucratic organizations, bureaucracies get a really bad rap, I think. They're like anything. Think about a perspective from 0 to 100. Well, a bureaucratic organization that's manages, on a level that they're 99 out of 100 and they're clear over here and they're very controlling and they're very fixed. Think about something like maybe the old Soviet Union or maybe China. It might be an example, a current day example. That's maybe not very healthy. But having just complete lack of control over on this side of the spectrum, that's not good either. So you got to find the right mix. Anytime you've got an organization over 10 people, or for sure over 100 people, you've got to have a bureaucracy in place. You've got to have management structures. You've got to have design structures in your business that help you manage as your organizations get more complicated. Now, when you think of something like the United States government, everybody bags on the bureaucracy, the government bureaucracy. Well, the U.S. government obviously is very, very large. It's very, very unwieldy, and it's very, very complicated to manage. So it takes a government bureaucracy. So trying to go in and completely blow up bureaucracies, even if you did that, by the time the dust settles, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to start rebuilding another bureaucracy. Yeah, it may be different, but you're still going to have a bureaucracy. So we just have to manage those and try to keep the balance right. And there's a huge tug of war in the U.S. The Republicans think we have too much bureaucracy. The Democrats don't think we have enough at times. They think we need more regulations. They think we need more departments of government to watch businesses and watch different entities that need to be managed and controlled. So there's always that tug of war. That's the sign of a healthy democracy, but it's kind of on hyperdrive right now. Again, here's some of the things going into more detail on the scientific management approach. Again, it talks about Taylor and Frederick Winslow Taylor and some of the things that were pioneered about that time. Bureaucratic organizations, again, going through some of the things that I was talking about. Actually, the concept of bureaucratic organizations is traced back to a gentleman by the name of Max Weber. Check into that a little bit more. And as I said, the term bureaucracy has taken a negative meaning in today's organizations, but the value of bureaucratic principles are still evident in many organizations, and they still need to be there in some form or another. Here's a characteristic of what an ideal bureaucracy might look like. It's got division of labor and clear definitions. Positions organized in a hierarchy of authority, managers subject to rules and procedures, management separate from the ownership of the organization, administrative acts and decision recorded in writing, and personnel selected and promotion based on technical and based on qualifications. I mean, if you look at that ideal bureaucracy, there's a lot of merit to that. I think that in many cases, management in large organizations, especially public organizations, does need to be separate from ownership. It gives an air of professionalism to that. So bureaucracies, as they've taken on a negative connotation, they are not necessarily bad. It's just where they land on the scale and how they're managed. Administrative principles, 14 general principles of management, many still used today. Utility, unity of command, division of work, unity of direction, um, Fail identified 5 functions of management. We talked about some of that: planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, controlling. Another part of management science is the quantitative perspective, use of mathematics, statistics, and other quantitative techniques. This has been enhanced by the evolution of the computer, and that is an ongoing trend, obviously, as businesses get bigger and more complex, and as we get more and more data, we get more and more information, we have to figure out how to manage all of that. We've got a new department in our business school and in the university that started in its business and data analytics. And that whole thing trains people in terms of how to help businesses manage their data more effectively and better. 3 subsets of management science: operations research, which consists of mathematic model building and other applications of quantitative techniques. Operations management, which you'll have a class on if you haven't already. It should be in about your junior year. There's a class called Operations Management. It focuses on the physical production of goods and services. And then Information Technology, which focuses on the technology, software, etc. And all of those you'll have exposure to in the business school, obviously, at Newman. Now, operations research, honestly, probably the MBA program, MBA programs would probably get you more into that realm than probably you would in an undergrad. Humanistic perspective emphasizes the importance of understanding human behaviors, needs, and attitudes in the workplace, as well as social interactions and group processes. Primary subfields of this: human relations management, human resource perspectives, and behavioral sciences. One of the things that I highlight in my business classes, and usually I'll have an individual stand up and I'll have them stand up by me and I'll ask the class, how hard can this person work? And I'll ask them to define that and give me answers. And some people say, well, as hard as he wants to, or some people say as hard as you make him. Some people say what you incentivize to do and things like that. Well, the bottom line is, for each individual, how hard a person can work, the only one that knows that is you. We had a fire in our business that leveled one of our buildings. And so everybody, until we got a new facility put back together, were out of work. I mean, we had some business interruption insurance, so we were able to pay some people during that period of time, but we weren't going to be back to full employment until we got a new facility put back together. So that meant initially we had to put a temporary facility together before we could buy and find another new facility. Well, we found out during that period that our employees had skills we had no idea that they had. We also found out that our employees could work very, very hard, much harder than we would have ever realized. And the reason for that is necessity is the mother of invention. We all had the incentives to work as hard as we could to get our business put back together so that we could get back to full employment and get back to getting full paychecks again. And we turned it around in about a week's time to get into that temporary facility and get our business back up and running. It took us about another couple months to buy the next building that we were in. That was a more permanent facility, but we were at least back up and running and had all of our employees back working again within a week after that fire. We had enough business interruption insurance to kind of keep people pretty whole through that period of time, so people didn't lose too much. But had it taken us 3 weeks to a month to get back into a temporary facility, we would not have had enough money to keep everybody floating probably that long. So everybody knew that. Everybody really rolled up their shirt sleeves, and we found out there were people that were carpenters that could do all these different things that we would never even imagine, or that we would have never even thought to ask that they do for us. Human relations perspective and human relations movement. This is based on the idea that effective control comes from within the employee rather than from strict authoritarian control. Again, that's what I was just referring to. There is something, you might want to look this up if you haven't ever heard of it. The Hawthorne studies provided research support. Human relations, not money, best explained increased output. Employees performed better when managers treated them positively. So you go to Wikipedia and punch in Hawthorne studies, that'll come up, and you can check that out further if you'd like. Here's a kind of a historic theories that you might want to check into, Theory X and Theory Y. Theory X states the average human being has an inherent dislike of work and will avoid it if possible. Theory Y is the expenditure of physical and mental effort and work is as natural as play or rest. The average human being does not inherently dislike work. So Theory X says that people inherently dislike work. Theory Y says people don't dislike work. Given the right circumstances and the right environment, they would just as soon work. I think we've seen Theory Y and Theory X at work if you just notice the people around you during the shutdown. The people that really were climbing the walls and that really wanted to get back to work as soon as possible, even though they could maybe work from home or whatever, those people are probably more on the Theory Y scale. Some people probably enjoyed that shutdown. They like not being able to work and things like that. Maybe that's the ones that are more towards the Theory X. I don't think everybody's either Theory X or Theory Y. Again, I think it falls on a continuum, and you fall up and down that scale. So, other strategies that are based on behavioral science, matrix organizations, self-managed teams, corporate culture, management by wandering around. We definitely used a behavioral sciences approach to our business. We believed that people wanted and liked to work, and I think by and large they did. Now you get what you hire, right? There are some people that we didn't hire that probably didn't like working. It was a paycheck and it was a job, but by and large, most of our employees were that way. And so we could let them have a lot of rope. We gave them a lot of leeway in terms of how they handled customer situations. We trusted their judgment. We gave them even budgets. If they felt like something had gone horribly awry, they could do things to fix it. And we gave them some budgets to do that. And we did a lot of management by wandering around. We went to our stores often. We got around. We talked with our people. We met with them. We met their families. We had social functions. I knew them. I knew their families. I knew kind of what their goals and desires were. We tried to manage careers, things like that. So we definitely use that behavioral science approach, I feel. Recent trends in systems thinking. The ability to see the distinct elements of a situation as well as the complexities. Being able to see all of the different things and look for causality. Sometimes if you miss causality, it can create you big problems. I had a businessman who ran a restaurant one time that was a friend of mine that he wanted me to consult. He had a problem with his business and he thought he wasn't paying people enough. And so he kept raising wages, but he kept having people leaving. And so I just went into his restaurant and I spent a couple hours one day and I just watched the ebb and flow. And he told me I could have access to talk to people. So I talked to different people. And at the end of it, after just a few hours, I could kind of figure out what his problem was. And it wasn't compensation. People felt like they were paid fine. Matter of fact, there were some that just flat told me that they couldn't believe he gave the last raises he gave because they felt like they were paid well before that. But it came down to the reason people were leaving his business is because of him, because of the way he treated people, his communication styles. He was very brusque. He was very demanding. He didn't listen. And so, I told him, I said, you can save a lot of money if you'll just learn the softer skills of management. And he did. And I coached him. I worked with him for a while. I tied him into some seminars and some things like that he could do. And within 6 months, he had turned his whole business around. He had turned his whole culture around. People enjoyed working there. His turnover dropped dramatically. And so it made a big difference. But he didn't understand causality. He didn't understand what was causing him his problems. So he wasn't looking at the right elements of his complex situation, and he wasn't picking up on the causality of it. So here's a nice graph, just systems thinking in circles of causality. You might want to spend some time and take a look at that. Recent trends, contingency views. What works in one setting might not work in another. Contingency means that one thing depends on other things. So, and this is very relevant to what we're going through currently. We have a situation that nobody planned for, and nobody probably could have planned for, but I'm sure there are businesses out there that even though they didn't predict this one thing exactly, they had contingency plans in place that they could stick and move a little quicker than some organizations could when this pandemic hit. And now they're also putting contingencies in place depending on how this thing plays out. Will there be another shutdown? Won't there be a shutdown? Will there be partial shutdowns? And you're really thinking in terms of how an organization needs to be positioning. Here's a ranking of the top 10 tools globally and in North America for management that you could go through, from benchmarking to strategic planning, outsourcing, balanced scorecards. If you haven't been introduced to balanced scorecards, you might want to look those up. There's plenty of stuff out there on them. Once again, probably a Wikipedia page if you wanted to bone up on that. They're basically a scorecard that shows you all of the key elements and components of your business and gives you scores of either 1 to 10, or might give you a red, yellow, green that shows you the health of all the subcomponents of your business. Change management programs, big data analytics, total quality management, all those type of things. When you get into operations management, I just talked about this today. You'll look at things like big data analytics and supply chain management. That's real central to the core of operations management. This shows an example of the supply chain for a retail organization. And then again, some of the newest trends, the bossless workplace, using engagement to manage millennials. As we're getting into millennials, more into the workforce, people are figuring out that it takes a different management style to manage these folks. And it doesn't mean they're necessarily bad, but it does mean that what worked for different generations isn't necessarily going to work for these folks. And I'll guarantee you, whoever comes behind millennials, what worked for millennials may not work for them. That's just these generational transfers. Each generation has different characteristics, and it means that you have to change up the deck a little bit in terms of how you manage people. So there's a really good video out there from Simon Sinek on how to manage millennials, and it's about 15 minutes. I may plug it into the mix sometime on this class. Pretty interesting video. Historical struggles, social business, the answer. You're seeing this now, whereas more and more people pick their businesses that they do business with, that they invest with, based on their social scorecard, their cultural scorecard, how they, what their position and how they stand on certain issues. You're seeing these lines of demarcation right now in the Black Lives Matter movement. The NBA in particular, If you've watched any of their games, they have Black Lives Matter on their basketball courts. They have social causes instead of their names on the back of their jerseys. They just canceled playoff games last night because of a police shooting that just happened. So these social causes and cultural causes are getting to really dominate the landscape. And in some cases, businesses are really almost being forced to pick a side in some ways. And if you pick this side, this group of customers are not going to deal with you or invest in you. If you pick the other side, you're going to have the same problem, the inverse of that. So businesses, like it or not, fair or not, I don't know. But businesses are getting thrown in the middle of all of this, and whether it be on sexual orientation issues, on gender issues, whatever it is, from the hashtag Me Too era to the LGBTQ issues, businesses are getting thrown in the mix on this stuff, and may not be fair at times, but it is the reality that we're in. And with social media, these things can really build up fast and tidal wave over the top of businesses and almost bury them if they don't watch how they navigate these landscapes. Okay, well, that is it for today. And this week, I wanted to just get the first one of these done. Appreciate everybody's attention. And again, for those of you that are on quarantine or maybe sidelined currently because of health issues, be sure and stay safe and stay well. And if you do happen to be sick, recover quickly. I look forward to having you in class again.